A trade this massive, we had to start the show with our good friend Pierre LeBrun, our hockey insider. Pierre, first of all, great to see you. Thanks for being on the show. We appreciate it.
Back-to-back nights. I love it. Let's do it.
This is phenomenal because we talk about this all the time. Jim Rutherford, he wants a guy. He goes and gets him. Trade deadline, schmade deadline. He's getting him 5 weeks early. And how did it all come together, Pierre?
Yeah, he does like to go get his guy early. Obviously, him and the GM Patrick Alvin doing some big-time work here on this day, the last day of January, because Jim Rutherford's had a lot of January trades in his history, so technically still a January trade. What happened is basically 4 days ago, Vancouver reached out to Calgary and said, we're ready to get serious on Lindholm if you guys are. And Craig Conroy then turned around and went to some of the other teams that had expressed interest in Lindholm and said, are you guys ready to get in this as well? And at the end of the day, I don't think anyone could match, the kind of package that Vancouver put together, Jay. And I'm not saying that the Canucks overpaid, although ask me again in 5 years with some of the future assets here. But I certainly think they had to pay the market price when you consider a year ago the kind of prices that were paid in the Bo Horvat deal and also Ryan O'Reilly. It's pretty similar. And what's also similar, those were early trades, right? And so a price was paid here. I think Calgary got a really decent haul. A good job by Craig Conroy. But for the Canucks, I think well worth it. You have a chance to go deep this year. It's an exciting year. And Lindholm, so many check marks for the Vancouver Canucks. Right-handed center, can play wing, second line center, a top six winger, penalty kill, power play. There is no other player that was currently on the market that fit the criteria better than Elias Lindholm in terms of what the Vancouver Canucks needed. But at the end of the day, a deal that I think both teams feel really good about on this night.
And, you said it, the Canucks very clearly going for it. For the Flames, still a bit murky. Is this just the beginning? You and I talked about this on yesterday's show. Is this just the beginning for Craig Conroy, Pierre, or where is Craig Conroy's head at?
Yeah, and what I mentioned last night, Jay, was that teams that have been calling the Flames over the last couple of weeks were getting different answers. Are you ready to start, dumping guys or not? And we're getting different answers. Well, I think we just got our answer. and the fact is, by the way, that another pending UFA, defenseman Chris Tanev, who's in huge demand, and there's a dozen teams that would like to get in on that action. He was a name that was brought up in this trade discussion between Calgary and Vancouver, sources confirm. So this could have been an even bigger deal that we're talking about. But I think the kind of assets that Calgary needed for that to be part of it was too high a price for Vancouver to pay. But I guess Canucks could keep tabs on Chris Tanev between now and March 8th. But also Noah Hanifin, pending UFA, we'll see where that goes. And so I do think this signals for the Calgary Flames some sort of roster reset for sure. And when it comes to Lindholm, by the way, who's obviously a pending UFA, Jay, contract talks really were nowhere between Calgary and Elias Lindholm. In fact, they really stopped going anywhere before the start of this season, is what I'm told. A sizable gap, and they never really got going again after that. So this was probably always what was going to happen unless the Flames were sitting in a playoff spot. I remember Craig Conroy made a big deal when he got named GM a couple of years ago that they weren't going to lose big-time UFAs for nothing, which is what happened with Johnny Gaudreau.
It's so fascinating because Lindholm was on his way to Toronto for the All-Star game when he was traded. The Canucks did the same with Bo Horvat en route to the All-Star game last year. So just be careful if you're right, Pierre. I mean that's got to mean something.
Well, what it means is back to the start. Jim Rutherford loves to make these trades early. But the other thing we should mention here is that Patrick Alvin, I think, will do all he can to make this a long-term relationship with Elias Lindholm. There's nothing in the works now. There's nothing cooked or in the drawer. There is no extension. But I think that between now and July 1st, the Canucks are going to try all they can to sign him. I just don't know if it'll happen. Number two, if the two GMs involved, Alvin and Conroy, were happy guys after this trade on this night, Jay, I'll tell you who the third happiest GM in the NHL was. Kent Hughes in Montreal, because the number one center among pending UFAs is off the market. Guess who's next on that list? That's Sean Monahan. We talked about that. So now Montreal Canadiens have lots of time to be the center of attention until, of course, other centers end up on the market, which is possible.
Yes, and it continues to bring us back to that question. Will the Habs get a first-rounder for Sean Monahan? Pierre, any bets now? Does it make it more likely after this deal or less?
I think it makes it more likely. I think that was a sizable price with multiple assets. And if you're asking me if they can get a first straight up for Monahan based on those circumstances, I think it's possible. Again, because Monahan has a much smaller AAV at just under $2 million. And if the Habs retain a part of that, that's part of the equation. Well,
I could just sit and talk to Pierre the whole show, but we have other sports to get to. So, Pierre, we got to let you go. Thanks for joining us on the show today.
Right on, right on.